Hey everybody, welcome to the Ultimate Job Search and Career Podcast. I am Bill, the company's expert, and in this episode, we're going to talk about when to expect a response from your job applications. We're also going to talk about handwritten thank you notes, if those make any sense, and we're going to talk about work gaps, resume work gaps, and why all the activities on your resume have to be professional, and does age matter? We're going to talk a little bit about ageism. So all that and more on this episode. But first, it behooves me to tell you that I have some amazing viewers and listeners that send in these questions. So if you have sent in a question and I haven't answered in the comments, always listen to the podcast because that's where I usually address the more complicated questions that require more of an answer. Do you like that when I talk like that? Behooves me. It sounds like someone got kicked by a horse. Anyway, let's dive right in. We're covering 4 questions that were sent in. So let's start with the first one, which is when to expect a response. So this is from someone called Free Guy 2.0. And Free Guy says, question, I've been applying for many applications on posted jobs and find that even after lengthy application processes, I don't even get a response, not even a rejection mail. Ideally, how long should a person wait for a response from recruiters after applying before calling it quits? Also, what is the best way to follow up on these applications? Okay, excellent question, Free Guy 2.0. I like your name, 2.0. That means you have remade yourself. The metamorphosis is complete. Okay, you've asked several questions here. The first one being, you are sending in job applications and you're not getting a response. And how long should you wait before calling it quits? I don't know what that means. That means just giving up and not having a job and living in a box. But here's the deal. Look, I have spoken extensively about this. Now, there are many ways to find a job. Okay. Applying for posted jobs is only one of several ways to get a job. Okay. And not only me, but most people that give advice on how to get a job and careers and stuff, they will tell you that if you're doing a job search, you're in the process of hunting for a job, don't do just one thing. Investigate more than one of the methods to get a job. Okay. So, for example, this is one method. Networking is another method. Okay. And within networking, there's a whole bunch of different ways there too. But I've covered these on my YouTube channel in several videos, like the different methods. Okay. So, but let's answer your question here. In the vast majority of cases, if you're sending in a job application in response to a posted job that you find on the internet or elsewhere, okay, in the vast majority of cases, you will not get an interview, and it's becoming increasingly common that you will not even get a response. Okay. Now, don't take this. I know this is easier said than done, but don't take this as some kind of signal that you are unemployable or you're doing something wrong. That is the norm. Okay. Now, one of the things that's going on here is that posted jobs are the default way of getting a job for a lot of people, especially a lot of young people that are just starting out. It seems like the way you would get a job. It's the most obvious way. You would look for posted jobs, you would respond to them, and they would, call you in for an interview. And that would lead to getting hired, right? That seems like the most obvious method. It's actually not the method that most people use to get a job, but it's the most visible, okay? So what you get is you get a disproportionate number of job seekers chasing the jobs that are posted, okay? And a below average amount of God, words are just not my thing today, apparently. But a below average amount of people applying for jobs in the hidden job market. Okay, so hidden jobs tend to be very good because you have surprisingly little competition for them, whereas posted jobs, it's much stiffer competition. Okay, that's what's going on here. So because of that, You have a lot of people applying for every posted job. You have well over 100 applications on average for every posted job. Put it this way. Several years ago, it was an average of 100 applications for every posted job. Now, I believe it's above that. It's above 100, so it might be 200 or something. Now, statistically, if you are one of 200 people applying for a job, that means, all things being equal, you have a 0.5% chance of being selected, right? The odds are really not in your favor. Conversely, if you're applying for a job that there's only 2 candidates, right, 2 applicants, then you have a 50% chance of getting that job, right? Just statistically, just going off numbers and not looking at anything else, okay? So the norm when applying for posted jobs is that you are not going to get a response, okay? That happens to something like 99% of applicants for any job that you apply for, okay, especially on the internet, because it's so easy to apply for jobs. Everybody's applying for jobs that way, okay? So what that has led to is imagine that you are a recruiter, okay, and you have posted a job and you've received, say, 200 applications. Well, what behavior does this lead to in the recruiter? This leads the recruiter to essentially only want to interview a short list of people that meets the requirements exactly, okay? If you only have a few people to choose from, then you'd want to interview people that, could be close to what you stated you're looking for. But when you have 200 people to choose from, anyone who doesn't appear absolutely perfect for it will most likely not get selected. So this is the situation you're up against, okay? And then there's a bunch of factors that complicate things. When you have 200 applicants, usually you're going, your resume is not being read by a human. You're going and getting your resume filtered by applicant tracking software that looks for very specific things. And that stuff is always changing because it's as soon as people discover a hack to get around the applicant tracking software, the applicant tracking software is usually updated to respond to that hack and not fall for it. So it's a never-ending game of cat and mouse. So that's kind of the situation. Now, this sounds very depressing. Doesn't sound very hopeful. But the good news is that, as I said, this is only one way of finding a job. And as it turns out, it's not a very good way of finding a job. Okay? Think of it this way. If you're young and you're single and you want to meet a significant other, the thing that they always used to show in the movies was people hooking up in bars. Okay? You'd go to the bar and look for a girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever you're into. In reality, there are a lot other places to meet people than bars. And let's face it, usually a bar is a terrible place to meet people. You're not exactly going to come across a lot of high caliber people that are at their best in most bars. Okay. So that's kind of like what we're doing here. Looking for a job using this method is like the equivalent of trying to find your future spouse by cruising the local bar scene. I mean, it can happen, but is it typical? No. Are the odds in your favor? No. So that's what we're talking about. Okay. So, in fact, you mentioned that you don't get a response. Me personally, I actually think it's good that you don't get a response. Getting tons of rejection emails, I think, can do people a lot of psychological harm rather than just not getting a response. If you don't hear anything within a week, that pretty much is the signal that it just didn't happen, okay, in most cases. So that's the deal. So it says, ideally, Free Guy 2.0 is saying, ideally, how long should a person wait for a response for recruiters after applying before calling it quits? I think a couple of days to a week. If you haven't heard anything by a week, in most cases, that usually means it's not happening. I mean, the problem is we're going off statistics, right? There are cases where you could wait 6 months and then get the job. That has been known. But Is it likely? No. Does that usually happen? No. Usually it's within a couple of days. Okay. So that's what I would say to this. Now, always remember, and I've said this before in previous episodes, always remember, you should not be waiting by the phone to hear news of applications you put in. You should always be focusing on the next opportunity. Okay. So that's how you handle this psychologically. That's how you handle this practically. That's what tends to give the best results. Always be focusing on the next opportunity and discovering what those are and making them happen rather than focusing on the past, on applications you've already sent in. Okay. Your goal should be just to throw out as much of these that are as good a quality as possible. And if you keep doing it, eventually you will get some bites. Okay. That's how this works. It's a numbers game. Finally, Free Guy 2.0 says, also, what is the best way to follow up on these applications? Well, if you're going to follow up, usually what I would recommend is you follow up once. Okay. And this is a case where people don't like the answer to this, because what I'd recommend is you actually pick up the phone. Okay. Pick up the phone and call the recruiter. If you have their phone number or you have the number for the company or anything like that, do a phone call follow-up. Okay. The reason I say that is because following up over email or messenger or like any other electronic means is a lot easier to ignore. Okay. And the reason you're doing this is because it also signals that you're more serious about it. If you can pick up the phone and call someone in person, that carries more weight than sending, a text or an email or something like that. Okay. So that's what I'd say. But in all honesty, if you are going the route of just applying for posted jobs, I wouldn't worry about following up unless this job was like 1 in a million, and it was your dream job, and you're absolutely nervous about it because you really, really want it to happen specifically. Unless that's the case, I would say don't bother about following up. Okay. Because this is just purely a numbers game, and you're going in there with over 100 candidates on average for each job. So, a lot of times, also in this day and age, as you guys all probably know, recruiters put up a lot of barriers to talking to potential candidates that are unsolicited. So, that's the other thing. Why put yourself through the psychological torture of trying to communicate with people that really don't want to communicate with you? It's like, it's a, don't call us, we'll call you type situation. Okay. So that's what I would say. I mean, of course there's always exceptions to this, but that is the rule. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. I know that doesn't sound very encouraging, but then again, what is encouraging is to supplement this type of job search with networking type job searches. Okay. I've done lots of videos about that, so you can check those out to know what specifically you got to do that. Okay. So special thanks to Free Guy 2.0 for saying this in. You guys are awesome. Just applying for posted job after posted job, when you don't have any personal connection to the company whatsoever. That can be not very fruitful, and it can also be depressing. Let's be honest. It's a lot of rejection. Now, it's interesting that you mentioned following up, because basically the networking approach is you do the opposite. If you're going to have some kind of personal connection with the decision maker, with networking, you do it the other way around. You make a connection first. You make a phone call. You make a text or an email or messenger, like a DM or something. You do that on the front end. You do that first. Okay, so you send out something to a recruiter, or better yet, to a hiring manager, just a manager high up in an organization. And you send them something, say, are you hiring, or are you ever looking for this? Or if you're ever looking for this, Here I am. Let me know if you're interested. And you don't expect a response. But what'll happen is, companies are looking for candidates all the time, and you're looking for a job. If you keep doing this, sooner or later, before long, you're going to stumble across a manager who knows they have to hire someone with your skills. And before they even post the job, you just landed right in their lap, in a sense, right? You just said, hey, here I am, right? And that's how you get a job through networking. So instead of putting in an application and trying to talk to recruiters to follow up afterwards, I would recommend flipping those around. Try and make connections with managers through Google and LinkedIn and things like this. And then if they respond, then you initiate a dialogue, and then you're putting yourself forward for whatever opportunity they have. It's the same amount of work, but it yields much better results. And the entire process is nowhere near as depressing. Okay. It's a much more positive process. So special thanks to Free Guide 2.0 for saying that in. Okay, moving on. Now, here's another question from one of my awesome viewers and listeners. This is from Fiona Gallagher. Fiona Gallagher is responding to a video I did about how to write a thank you email. And she says, thank you as always. Your thoughts on handwritten versus email? ? I would have never considered handwritten as an appropriate method. However, I've recently seen the suggestion and I can see the pros. Would love your thoughts. Okay, that's interesting. This is one of those things where I've heard people recommend it, but I've never heard of, it getting really positive results. Like it just sort of goes into a void. I haven't heard the results. I've also heard people recommend sending cards, like actual cards, like you would receive, way back in the day, you would receive a birthday card or a holiday card in the mail. You would send a thank you card, a physical card that you mail to somebody through snail mail, and it would be in the card, it would be handwritten. It would say, thank you very much for, the opportunity to interview with you. And, it was great to meet you and this other person, that other person. If ever you're looking for someone in the future, let me know. Or thank you very much for the interview. I hope we will be in communication in the near future, something like this. And you would mail that out. And the theory behind it was that, everybody's sending thank you cards or thank you notes electronically, but you will elevate yourself above the crowd and stand out by having the distinction of sending this physical card, and that will stand out. And I've also heard people that say that the physical card will get read as opposed to an email, which, usually is just sent to a junk mail folder or spam filter or something like that. People don't really read them. Yeah, it's a thank you email, like one of 100 I've received today, right? So I have heard this said about handwriting, cards and notes and things like this. I've just never gotten any feedback on it. Now, personally, back when I was a CEO, when I was hiring people, this may have had, a small effect on me, but I would never hire somebody just because they wrote a very eloquent thank you note. I'd want to hire the right person. I'm not sure. I know there are some recruiters out there that, they really, in a sense, they really don't care too much what candidate they pick, as long as they're not going to get in trouble for it. And, as long as there aren't any red flags about you, you're fair game to be hired. You're one of the shortlist. And when it comes to that shortlist, they really have no opinion of which one they pick. Sometimes it's almost at random. I have seen that. It's ridiculous that people would do that, but there it is. So it's really not going to do you any harm. But the question is whether this makes a huge difference. I don't think so. If the job is really important to you, it's an exception. It's this thing that really stands out, and you want to do this, I say go ahead. It can't hurt, And depending on the nature of the person that gets it, it may hold sway with them too. You never know. So sure, nothing wrong with this, but I wouldn't try and do this like for all the jobs or all the interviews you go on. As a matter of course, it can be a lot of work. It can be prohibitively expensive and time consuming. So I would spend my time as a job seeker on other activities. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Thanks to Fiona Gallagher for sending that in. I'd never actually gotten that question before, so that's awesome. Okay, now we've got a couple more questions here. Let's see. I think I accidentally closed the wrong... No, here we go. Okay, so third question. This comes from someone called Pino. P-I-N-O, Pino. I like that name. Short and straight to the point. TBH, that's to be honest. To be honest, I don't understand why there is some expectation to be constantly doing something professional. This is what Pino says. If I took a break for a period of time and had the means to do so and can prove I have the skills to do a job, I quite simply do not understand why there is some unquestioned cultural rule, quote unquote, that says I need to constantly be doing something related to work. It feels simple-minded to me that this seems to have become a rule, quote unquote, in our current culture, and very frustrating that we now have to feel the need to scramble to justify any gaps in our resumes. I appreciate this video for helping me to make explanations, but the underlying problem frustrates me endlessly, and I hope that culturally we can shift away from this in the future. Now, this was in response to a video I did called Explain the Employment Gap on your resume, the resume gap, or a work gap, or whatever you call it. So that was Pino's question. So, or it was more of a statement than a question, but I guess the question was why do we have to always be showing that we're doing something professional during our entire work history on our resume? Okay, for example, if you took like 2 years to backpack around the world or something, and then you are coming back and trying to get a job, if you're dealing with a recruiter, a lot of the time, if you show this 2-year gap on your resume where you haven't been in school and you haven't been working, they will see that as a red flag. Okay, they don't like to see these work gaps. And this is what Pino's asking about. Now, the logic behind this is, like a lot of things recruiters do, the whole nature of recruitment and selection, at least today, is that, and I'm not necessarily knocking this, but the thing is, it's not really efficient to put in the time to really get to know the applicants. Okay, that's the problem. Sometimes you get a lot of applicants and you have to make decisions in order to refine your list, to shorten it, to pare it down, to get down to one candidate that you select. Okay, it's an elimination game. Now, in order to do that, you have to make judgments about people that often are based on superficial things that may not be accurate, okay? And the nature of recruiters is also that they're risk averse, okay? So they don't like things that could be risky, right? When they look into your background or they look into your traits or, whatever, they don't like things that could be a red flag, okay? So this is one of those, right? Now, if you have a gap on your resume, it doesn't really matter what you say to explain it, because the reality is that, unfortunately, at least the way recruiters think, that a lot of candidates will say whatever they need to say in the interview to explain something and get the job. So what they say might not be accurate. But if you have a 2-year work gap, okay, that's saying that there could be something wrong with this candidate. Maybe there's something seriously wrong with them. Maybe there's a reason why they weren't working. Maybe there's a reason why it took them so long to find a job. Okay. Maybe there's something that I don't know about them that's a real liability. Okay. So they don't know one way or another, but the risk is there. You've identified a red flag. Okay. So based on that thinking, all things being equal, they will tend to reject that candidate based on the simple fact that they had a work gap. There's 2 years on your resume that are unaccounted for. Okay, so that's what Pino is asking about. And this is the thinking behind it. Now, here we come up against one of the big problems with recruitment and selection, at least the way it's done in a corporate setting. Okay, because basically the work gap rule and many other rules that, have to do with identifying potential red flags and then eliminating a candidate based on a potential red flag or a risky element. Okay. The problem is all those serve to only hire candidates that fit an exact profile. Okay. If you are getting jobs, if you're doing a job search where you're applying only for posted jobs, and these are jobs in large organizations, and you're talking to corporate recruiters about them, the thing to win at that game, unfortunately, at least as we go into the future, seems to be you've got to be sort of the perfect candidate. You have to have an entire career that prepares you for the job that you're applying for now. Everything on your resume has to be pertinent and directly relate to the job you're applying for now. And you can't deviate from that. There can't be anything that makes you non-standard in any way, atypical. Now, I'm a big opponent of this. I think this is absolutely ridiculous. I've taught this in university, all these principles, and they make sense up to a point. But the problem is it leads you, if you take them to their conclusion, it leads you to a place that's completely ridiculous. Okay? You would end up with people that are offered jobs. Those candidates are completely vanilla. They have never done anything other than the job you're hiring them for. So you're losing out on a breadth of skill sets. I like to hire people that have done many things. They have context. They have seen how things are done in different situations, and they can use all that knowledge and experience to bring to their current job, whatever that job is. It also acknowledges that a lot of education is general and a lot of experience is general. If you get a degree in something or a certificate in something, or you've spent 5 years working in a certain job, that doesn't just qualify you to do that exact job. That also allows you to do other jobs too. But that principle seems to be lost on a lot of recruiters. Okay. So if you're trying to win at the game of applying for posted jobs and going through corporate recruiters, unfortunately, you have to play this game. So any work gap that you have on your resume, what would appease a recruiter usually is to show something career related that you've done during that time. Okay, so let's say you were out of work for 2 years. Okay, I would say take a training course so that when it comes time to update your resume, you can show truthfully that during that 2-year period, you were taking professional training of some kind. You were enhancing your professional skills. And as a result, that work gap is not really going to be a red flag because it doesn't indicate that you were just sitting at home doing absolutely nothing. It indicates that you were educating yourself. You were enhancing your skill sets, right? So you have to show something productive. This can be a problem for people that, maybe you had to care for a sick relative, or, you were on disability, or there was some other kind of thing in there, or maybe like Pino says, you just, you had the finances to just take a year off, and so you did. I mean, who wouldn't? I certainly understand that. It can be the best thing in the world for our mental health, our physical health. It shouldn't be necessarily regarded as a red flag, but the problem is that the recruiters they don't know. So they assume it's negative. It's It's a risky element. Okay? So if you're applying for these jobs, just fill the work gaps with something that's related to your career or to the current job. You're enhancing some kind of skill set. You're performing some kind of work. Maybe you're doing volunteering. I've done a video on this, so you can watch the video. But yeah, don't leave those gaps there. Now, once again, I hate to sound like a broken record, but this is only if you are going through the channel of applying for posted jobs. If this is a problem for you, if you get a job through networking, that is the fix for this problem, because you're not being looked at by a recruiter. You're being looked at by a hiring manager. And your selling point is not what it says on your resume. Your selling point is your initiative in contacting them, your professionalism in how you have communicated with them, and you are demonstrating your value right there in front of their face by interacting with them. Okay? They're talking to you for a reason, because you contacted them. None of the other candidates contacted them. You did, right? That already puts you ahead of all the other candidates that could be out there, right? You're the easy choice, the safe choice. And if they like interacting with you, they're getting a free sample of how you would be to work with by you interacting with them, okay? And that, if done correctly, can forgive a multitude of sins, including this, including having a work gap on your resume, okay? Because they're not judging you from a piece of paper, they're judging you from how you have been to deal with and the types of things you say and the initiative and professionalism you've demonstrated. So, don't get me wrong, you still have to have qualifications, obviously, but they're paying less attention to that and more attention to who you are as a person and how you are to deal with. So that can be the tiebreaker. That can be the fix for this issue as well as many other issues with your background. For example, changing careers. Maybe you have 20 years experience just in a different industry to the one you're applying in, right? That also is very hard to overcome if you're dealing with a corporate recruiter in a large organization for a posted job. Because the first question they're going to ask is, how much experience do you have? And in your case, it's going to be pretty much zero because you're changing careers. You got 20 years experience doing other things, but that doesn't help them. They want to know how many years of experience you have doing this job. And as you can see, that's a considerable drawback if you said, well, zero, because I'm changing careers. I used to be this and now I want to be this, And a lot of times you would be good in the new career, but the way we teach recruiters, unfortunately, is they don't understand things like transportable skills and stuff. So, okay, so that's what's going on. So to answer Pino's questions, that's the principles. Those are the principles behind what's going on here, okay? You have to show this. And if it is a problem, then don't go through this channel of applying for posted jobs. Go through networking or some other channel, okay? Back before certain global events of 2020, I'd recommend a lot of people applying in person, actually. It's the equivalent of networking. You reach out to someone because they're judging you on your interaction with them and your professionalism and how you are to deal with, and not purely on your work history. Okay, so special thanks to Pino for sending that in. Like I've said many times, I have some awesome viewers and listeners. Okay, moving on. So we have a question here. Now, I don't have the name of the person this came from. This was more of a sort of marketing thing, I think. Someone says, I have a question. Does age matter for getting selected for a particular opportunity, provided the person is a strong candidate for the profile? No, this isn't a marketing thing. This is somebody that sent this in. Why is it important for this to be, why is it important? Can this be overlooked when it comes to business? Okay, so here we get to the topic of, it's sort of ageism, but it's also, I don't know what you call it. It's like just what age is appropriate for different jobs. Usually, like think of it this way. Usually, large organizations, blue chip companies, like the really big, giant corporate enterprise, usually you don't see the CEO being 21 years old, you know? Now, is that ageism? It depends how you define ageism. I guess technically it is, but I think you could perhaps justify it because, I mean, anything that needs wisdom and life experience, you would usually not get a 21-year-old for that, right? Now, something that requires energy, optimism, and competitiveness, for that, you would get a 21-year-old. You would not hire a 65-year-old if you wanted energy, optimism, and, sort of an us against the world attitude. Usually you don't see that in 65-year-olds any more than you see wisdom and life experience in a 21-year-old. It's just kind of the nature of the traits and soft skills that are required for a job. Now, what further complicates matters is that it's really hard to get into somebody's head and assess the type of person they are. It really is. I mean, you can look at somebody's education and you can look at their work experience, but and that gives you some insight. You can also assess their personality and their opinions. But does that really tell you what type of person they are, how they would react under different stimuli in different conditions? No, it doesn't. It's very hard to see inside someone to really see who they are when you're just meeting them, as recruiters are, in this case, executive recruiters, in a job interview. You can't tell. Now, if you've worked with somebody for 20 years, you might be able to have some insight into who they are and the types of things they would probably do in different situations. But it can be quite complicated. So this is something that everybody's up against, okay? And it can be hard for young people that would be otherwise qualified for certain jobs, but they're less likely to be selected because they don't fit the typical profile of a younger person. Okay, some people are wise beyond their years. Some people are highly mature at a very young age, and it's unfortunate for them because they are up against this kind of bias, essentially. Now, I'm not in favor of, saying that, all CEOs of large organizations need to have a equal demographic of ages, I'm not for that. Okay. I think that these rules do make sense up to a point. And once again, they're going on generalizations. So if you don't fit the generalization, that can be pretty bad. I mean, you want to see the generalizations I'm talking about? They have hired many, many old people that one would think they would have maturity, they would have experience, and they would have a discipline and restraint. But as we've seen in a lot of high-profile scandals and things, obviously those people don't have those traits, right? So you can see how that norm backfires the opposite way too, right? Okay. Now, what can you do about this? Well, here's the thing. People tend to hire in their own image, okay? So let's say you're 65 years old and you want to get hired, don't go to a place where everybody working there is 20-something. If the hiring manager is 20-something years old, and everybody who works there is 20-something, chances are they're not going to select you. However, if you're 65 years old, go to a place where a lot of people working there are 65 years old, and the hiring manager is 65 years old, and you'll find that these biases and things suddenly go away. Okay? So that's what I would say to handle this. Whatever age you are, whether you're young, whether you're old, but you find that your age, for whatever reason, is getting in the way of people correctly assessing your abilities, that's the general rule to follow, okay? Go to a place where people there are more of your age and the decision makers are your age, and talk to those decision makers, okay? Once again, networking also will give you more of a fair crack at the whip, because in networking, they're basing it more on who you are as a person and how you are to deal with than anything it says on your resume or anything you have. Okay. So that's what I would say about that. But that's a great question. Sorry, I don't have the name of the person that sent that in, but thank you to whoever sent that in. That was a great question. So there you go. So hopefully that was informative. Thank you very much for your attention. You guys are all awesome. If you have a question or a comment, by all means, ask it in the comment section on my videos. If it's something very brief, I can maybe respond there. But if I don't, I usually select the more interesting ones and within my time limits and answer them on the podcast. So there you go. Anyway, thank you very much. Don't forget to check out my courses. They are listed down here on the screen. I have a Get Hired course where I teach absolutely everything you need to know to get hired. And I also have another course called the $100 MBA. And I teach everything that you would learn in an MBA program. Okay, I have an MBA myself. I'm a big believer in getting a master's of business administration, especially if you want a career in business. This helps in almost any type of career in your working life. Knowing this stuff will help. But you don't have to take 2 years off and pay 5 figures to do it. You just have to pay $100, and it's a self-study thing. I walk you through the textbooks. You read them, and there's no evaluations. So check that out. There's a link in the description box. And thanks for your attention. I will see you guys on the next episode. Take care.